The sun bore down on Cedar Ridge like it had a vendetta, the kind of midday heat that pressed into your skin, made the pavement shimmer, and turned even the calmest neighborhood into a tinderbox waiting for a spark. And right on cue, that spark came marching up my driveway in the form of Martha Keene, a woman who crowned herself queen of the local HOA, and apparently enforcer, executioner, and militia all in one. She was a sight, rage in human form. A faded flannel clung to her shoulders, a rifle strapped tight, like it was part of her uniform. Her face was red, so red, I couldn't tell if it was heat stroke or fury. Probably both. Her mouth moved fast, spewing out accusations about rule violations and unauthorized changes to my home. But the words melted in the heat before they ever reached me. What cut through loud and clear wasn't what she said, but what she carried. A gun, not metaphorically, a literal rifle, sling over her shoulder like she was patrolling a war zone instead of strolling through a peaceful cul-de-sac. It would have been funny if it weren't so damn disturbing. And maybe that's what made it dangerous. She actually believed this made her powerful. I didn't move much, just leaned a little harder against the doorframe, one hand tucked into my pocket, the other relaxed at my side. My eyes flicked down to the weapon, then back up to her quivering face. She was practically shaking, not from fear, but from that dangerous cocktail of false confidence and blind indignation. "You brought a rifle to enforce lawn care violations?" I asked, my voice even but laced with disbelief. "Martha, if I'd known forgetting to trim my hedges was a felony, I'd have called in the National Guard." Her grip tightened on the weapon like she thought I might lunge. "You think this is funny?" she snapped, her voice brittle and shrill. "You've broken the HOA's regulations. I'm here to enforce them." I raised a brow, not out of surprise, but out of sheer, exhausted amusement. This woman truly believed the HOA gave her the right to come armed to a neighbor's home. And in her mind, that gun gave her leverage, authority, power. But she had no idea who she was standing in front of, and that mistake was about to cost her. Martha wasn't backing down. In fact, the more I stared at her, the more fired up she got, pacing in small, angry circles at the foot of my porch like a guard dog on a short leash. Her voice rose, sharp and frantic, as she rattled off violations like they were criminal charges. Fence height, decorative lighting, even the plants I'd added by the walkway. She sounded like a courtroom drama on Fast Forward, except there was no judge, no jury, just a woman with a grudge and a loaded gun. "You've been ignoring HOA protocols for months," she barked. "You think you can just do whatever you want? Modify your property like the rules don't apply to you." I tilted my head and glanced back at my house, the very same house I had built with my own two hands, brick by brick, over years of hard work and long nights. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't offensive. It was clean, quiet, and modest, with just a touch of wilderness around the edges. But in Martha's world, my wildflowers were an act of war. My wind chimes, an affront to the order she'd spent her retirement trying to control. I took a step forward, slow and deliberate, feeling the heat radiate off the driveway. My boots crunched against the gravel as I approached her. Her grip on the rifle twitched. She didn't know what to do now, because bullies like Martha only thrive when people cower, and I wasn't in the mood to play along. "You know, Martha," I said quietly, "it's almost cute that you think showing up with a gun makes your threats more believable. But tell me something. Did the HOA vote to form a militia while I wasn't looking? Or is this just your own little fantasy of authority?" She blinked, just for a second, a crack in the armor, but her pride patched it fast. "The HOA has full rights to enforce compliance," she hissed. "And you, sir, are in violation. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll make sure you're removed from this community." Her words echoed across the empty street, bold and loud. But they didn't land the way she thought they would, because I wasn't afraid. I slipped my hand into my back pocket, pulled out something small and metallic, and held it up for her to see. A badge. Her face drained of color in an instant. "You might want to lower that rifle," I said calmly. "You're speaking to the sheriff." The silence that followed was the kind that crushes sound. It was the kind of silence that carries weight, one heavy with realization. Her mouth fell open, no sound, just breath. Her eyes flicked from the badge to my face, then back to the rifle in her hands like she was trying to remember how it even got there. You're the sheriff?" she stammered, her voice cracking. "You're just some guy. I thought." I smiled coldly. "Just some guy, huh? That's one hell of an oversight, Martha. I've been sheriff here for 6 years, and I've got to say, your people's skills haven't exactly improved with time." The rifle, once a symbol of her inflated power, suddenly looked like dead weight in her hands. She wasn't in charge anymore, and I had only just begun. Martha stood there, frozen, rifle lowered but not yet dropped, her brain still trying to reboot. That single sentence, "You're talking to the sheriff," had knocked the wind out of her inflated sense of authority. But me? I was just getting comfortable. "You know," I continued, voice steady and cool, "you're not the first person to underestimate me around here, but you might be the loudest." She didn't respond. Couldn't. Her eyes were locked on my badge like it had personally betrayed her. The neighborhood enforcer, self-appointed queen of compliance, had just realized she'd been barking up a tree she couldn't climb. But let's rewind. Martha Keene had been poking at me for months. Petty complaints, anonymous tips to the HOA, threats buried in passive-aggressive notes taped to my mailbox. It started with my fence, not the height, not the color, but the rustic aesthetic. Then it was the native plants in my yard. "Unkempt," she said. "Unsightly." After that, she went after my truck. A stock 4x4 Jeep, nothing fancy. But to her, it was a monster tearing through the fabric of the neighborhood. Every time she filed complaint, I let it go. Every time she stood on her porch and pointed at my yard with that wrinkled clipboard in hand, I gave her a nod and a wave, because I was waiting. See, what Martha didn't know, what she never bothered to find out, was that I'd been building my own case. Not against her at first. No, I was focused on the HOA. I knew there was something off. The way they handled fines. The way rules seemed to change overnight. The way certain people, like Martha, always seemed to benefit, while the rest of us paid for it. But then she crossed the line. She tapped into my private well, a line buried deep under my land, clearly marked and legally protected, and she used it to water her precious garden, without asking, without even telling me. The same woman who sent violation notices for improper plant spacing was stealing water from the very yard she hated. The first time, I ignored it. The second time, I installed a meter. The third time, I documented it. The fourth? Well, by then, I'd had enough. So I flushed her system with raw sewage, not out of spite, though I won't pretend it wasn't satisfying, but because I was within my rights, technically, legally, and deliciously within my rights. You'd be amazed what you can do when you know exactly where the loopholes live. Freeze frame right there, because, yeah, that's me, the sheriff whose private well was illegally tapped by the same woman who accused him of aesthetic misconduct. And when she tried to play dirty, I brought the mud. Now, standing on my driveway with her rifle drooping in her grip, Martha had no idea just how deep she was in it. She thought she'd been playing chess. But I'd already knocked overboard. Martha's breath hitched. Her knuckles whitened around the rifle stock, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. But the weight of reality was setting in fast, and even her delusion couldn't hold back the tide. She tried to speak, tried to reclaim some version control, but the words sputtered in her throat, like an old engine refusing to turn over. You can't just, you don't scare me," she muttered, the bravado in her voice slipping with every syllable. "The HOA will have you removed for this." I stepped down from the porch, slowly, calmly, each step measured like I was walking through water. "Martha," I said, voice low and flat, "the only person getting removed today is you." And then, like fate had been waiting for the perfect cue, the sound came. Sirens. Far off at first, but unmistakable. That high, rising wail slicing to the summer heat, growing louder with every passing second. Martha whipped her head toward the road. I could see her eyes widen as the sound registered. Could see her doing the math in her head. Backup. For me. And it hit her like a slap across the face. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was a scene. A response. A reckoning. She looked back at me, eyes wild, voice rising with panic. "You called the police?" "No," I said casually, folding my arms across my chest. "I called my deputies." That landed like a hammer. "You're making a mistake," she shrieked, voice suddenly brittle and sharp. "This is my neighborhood, too. I'm just trying to enforce the rules." I tilted my head, let her words hang in the air for a moment before replying with a kind of sarcastic calm that only made her unravel more. "Oh, right. The rules. The ones you made up in your head? Or are these the ones that say you can show up with a rifle and start issuing threats like your Judge Judy with a vendetta?" She tried to regain her footing, tried to tighten her grip on the illusion she'd been living in, but her foundation was crumbling fast. The sound of patrol cars turning the corner broke her last bit of focus. Her eyes darted toward the flashing lights as they crept closer, painting the end of my driveway in red and blue. And still, she wouldn't let go. "You think you can ruin me?" she hissed, stepping forward. "I've worked too hard to build this community. You're just some petty little sheriff with a badge and a grudge." I didn't blink. "No," I said. "I'm the man who finally stood up to you. And now, Martha, it's your turn to answer for everything." Behind me, the crunch of tires on gravel signaled the arrival of my deputies. I didn't look. I didn't need to. This moment was mine, and she knew it. She stared at the approaching officers, mouth half open like she was still searching for a way out. But she had run out of moves. And the sirens? They weren't a warning. They were a verdict. Even as the patrol cars idled just feet away, Martha stood there trembling, not out of fear, not yet, but out of disbelief. She couldn't wrap her head around it. Her threats weren't working. Her voice, usually so commanding in HOA meetings and passive-aggressive newsletters, now barely rose above the hum of the engines behind me. But if anyone thought this standoff started today, they'd be wrong. Martha's war had been waging long, before she ever marched up my driveway with a gun. I'd just been the first to stand in her way and not flinch. For months, she treated the HOA like it was her personal kingdom. She didn't just enforce the rules. She twisted them, rewrote them, weaponized them. Her victims? Anyone who dared to have a personality. She fined Old Man Carter 3 times in 1 month for leaving his recycling bins out an hour late. Sent violation letters to a single mother for letting her kids draw chalk on the sidewalk. Called in a landscaping complaint because a war veteran's American flag was too large and disruptive to neighborhood uniformity. But her favorite target? Me. Because I didn't roll over. Because my yard didn't look like a magazine cover. Because I had a Jeep with mud on the tires and a house with native plants that grew tall and untamed. In Martha's world, that meant I was enemy. But I was playing the long game. While she was counting code violations, I was collecting evidence. You see, I knew about her little side projects. The backdoor deals with contractors she gave exclusive access to. The way she used HOA fines to quietly funnel money into neighborhood improvements that somehow only happened near her property. And, of course, the water. The secret she thought no one noticed. Tapping into my well to irrigate her garden. The one she flaunted like it belonged to a botanical exhibit. She thought it was clever, thought she was invisible. But I'd traced it, documented it, let it play out just long enough to catch her red-handed. And when I flushed her system with sewage, that wasn't revenge. That was a line in the sand. Now, standing in front of me with that rifle drooping and a full police presence behind her, Martha wasn't the queen of the HOA anymore. She was a neighbor with nowhere to run. I watched her chest rise and fall, her breathing fast and shallow. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off before the lies could form. "You think this is about flowers and fences?" I said, voice sharp as a blade. "You've been playing God with people's lives, Martha, bleeding them with fines, burying them in red tape. And now, you brought a weapon to the wrong driveway." One of my deputies stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "I'm going to need you to set that rifle down." Slowly. For the first time, her hands began to shake in a way that had nothing to do with rage. Because this time, the rules weren't hers. And justice? It had finally arrived at her doorstep. Martha's hands trembled as the weight of the rifle suddenly became too much. Her pride wouldn't let her drop it. Not yet, but it was slipping. Just like her grip on everything she once controlled. The deputy's voice cut through the silence again. "Ma'am, that weapon needs to come off your shoulder. Now." For a heartbeat, she stood still. Then, without a word, she slowly unslung the rifle and let it slide down the driveway, the metal clattering softly against the concrete. It was the sound of her authority shattering. Her eyes darted between me and the officers, panic finally catching up to her ego. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "I was just trying to talk to him. I didn't point it. I didn't." "Save it," I interrupted coldly. "You walked onto my property with a loaded firearm. That's not a conversation starter. That's a felony." One of the deputies moved to secure the weapon, glancing at me for confirmation. I gave him a single nod. It was all routine now. But Martha? She looked like she just realized the game she'd been playing was a monopoly. It was chess, and she'd just been cornered. "You don't understand," she cried, turning toward the officers as if they might offer her some form of refuge. "He's been breaking the rules. I was enforcing them. That's all. The HOA." "The HOA," I said, cutting her off again, "is under investigation." That shut her up. She blinked. "WH, what do you mean?" I stepped forward, closing the space between us until she had no choice but to look me in the eye. "I've been building a case for months. Illegal fines, fraudulent citations, unauthorized property access, including your little stunt with my well." Her mouth opened, closed, open again. You're bluffing." I leaned in just enough that only she could hear me. "Then by all means, Martha, test me." One of the officers pulled out his notebook, flipping to a fresh page. "Sheriff," he said without looking up, "anything else she needs to answer for?" I tilted my head thoughtfully. "You might want to ask about the water. The unauthorized tap into my well system. I've got documentation, video, timestamps. It's all ready to go." Martha's knees buckled slightly. Her whole body was fighting to hold on to what little power she thought she had left. "You don't have anything on me," she whispered. "You're just trying to scare me." I stepped back, arms folded across my chest, and gave a slow, dry laugh. "I'm not trying to scare you, Martha. I'm trying to stop you from hurting any more people." She looked around, maybe hoping for a sympathetic face. But all she saw were officers doing their job and a sheriff who wasn't bluffing. She had come to my home to intimidate me with a rifle and a title she had inflated in her own mind. But now she was just another suspect with a lot of explaining to do. Martha was unraveling. Right there on my driveway, her perfectly manicured image collapsing into a mess of sweat, fear, and desperation. She glanced again at the officers, her voice barely above a whisper now, hollow and thin. "You can't do this. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just following the rules." I didn't flinch. "No, Martha, you were following your rules. The ones you made up. The ones that let you bully people. Find them. Threaten them. And now the rules, the real ones, they've caught up to you." Her head shook slowly, like her body refused to believe what her ears were hearing. "You're twisting this. You're trying to ruin everything I built." I kept my voice level, firm. "No, you did that all by yourself. I'm just making sure it gets documented." At that, one of my deputies stepped forward. His voice was calm, rehearsed, exactly how it should be. "Ma'am, you're being detained for unlawful trespass while armed and for unlawful access to private utilities. You have the right to remain silent." No. Martha's voice cracked as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "You don't understand. I was trying to protect the neighborhood." "The neighborhood didn't ask for your protection," I said sharply. "It asked for peace, and you didn't listen." She turned to me, her voice trembling. "This isn't over, Sheriff. You hear me? You think this ends with a pair of handcuffs." I took a slow breath, nodded once. "I know it doesn't. That's the part I'm ready for." And just like that, Martha Keene, the self-proclaimed guardian of Cedar Ridge, was led to a patrol car, her threats fading with every step she took. The street was quiet again. The sun had begun to dip low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the pavement. But it wasn't just the heat that had broken. It was her grip. Neighbors peeked from windows. A few had come outside, watching from porches with wide eyes and quiet murmurs. The queen was dethroned, and the kingdom, at least for the day, was finally free of her reign. One of the officers looked back at me before shutting the cruiser door. "Got a lot of paperwork ahead of you, Sheriff." I smirked. "Yeah, and a whole lot of truth that needs writing." Because this wasn't just about one rifle or one ridiculous HOA charge. This was about everything that came before it, and everything that was coming next. After patrol cars pulled away, a strange quiet settled over Cedar Ridge. The kind of quiet that wasn't really silence. It was hesitation. The neighborhood was holding its breath, unsure of what had just happened, unsure what it meant. But then, one by one, doors opened. Neighbors stepped out. Some stood frozen on their porches, coffee mugs in hand, still trying to process the sight of Martha Keene being driven away in the back of a police cruiser. Others came closer, cautiously at first, like they were approaching the edge of a wildfire that had finally burned itself out. Old Man Carter was the first to speak. "About damn time," he muttered, arms crossed, eyes locked on the now empty driveway. "She fined me $200 for a garden gnome. Called it a visual disruption." He shook his head. Glad someone finally stood up to her. A few quiet chuckles broke the tension. Small ripples of relief rolled across the street. No one said it out loud, but we all knew the truth. Martha had ruled this place like a tyrant dressed in pearls and HOA stationery. And for too long, no one had dared push back. Until now. Over the next hour, neighbors came by. Some offered quiet thanks. Others shared their own stories. Fines that didn't make sense, threats disguised as notices, backhanded comments at HOA meetings that cut deeper than they should have. One woman, eyes glassy with frustration, confessed she had nearly sold her home just to get away from it all. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Martha's downfall wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. The mask was off now. The stories were flowing. And what had once been whispered in private was finally being spoken aloud. By sundown, something had shifted. The HOA board held an emergency meeting, clearly rattled by the fallout. There were murmurs of new elections. An anonymous letter from a former board member found its way to my mailbox, detailing questionable financial records, off-books expenditures, vendor kickbacks, and notes about favorable treatment for select enforcers. One name kept coming up, Martha Keene. Her crusade had always seemed personal. Now we knew it was profitable, too. I shared the documents with the county prosecutor, along with everything else I'd gathered. Video footage, utility logs, complaint patterns. It wasn't just Martha on the hook anymore. It was the entire framework she helped build. This wasn't just a personal victory. This was a reckoning. The people of Cedar Ridge were waking up. And for the first time in a long time, they weren't afraid to ask questions. It didn't take long. Just 3 days after her arrest, Martha Keene returned to Cedar Ridge. No rifle this time, just a tight-lipped expression, dark sunglasses, and a lawyer who looked like he charged by the glare. Her car rolled up slow, deliberate, like she wanted everyone to see, like she still believed she had something to prove. But she didn't come to intimidate. She came to negotiate. I saw it coming from the moment she stepped out of that shiny black SUV, hair pulled back, lips pressed into a defiant line, trying to look composed, but wearing humiliation like a second skin. She walked up my driveway, her attorney in tow, as if she hadn't been in handcuffs less than a week ago. I met them at the curb, arms folded, posture casual. Not because I wasn't alert, but because I wanted her to see it. I wasn't afraid of her. Not anymore. "Sheriff," she said, her voice clipped, but no longer sharp. "You think you've won." I didn't respond at first. Just tilted my head, watching her through narrowed eyes. Her lawyer spoke next, stepping forward like a man who thought he could defuse the world with legalese. "We'd like to discuss terms," he said. "There's no reason the situation needs to escalate further. My client is willing to—" "Your client," I interrupted, eyes still locked on Martha, "is lucky she didn't face felony charges." His jaw tightened. Martha's eyes flashed, but she didn't argue. I stepped closer. Not enough to threaten, just enough to make the point crystal clear. This isn't about a garden anymore, or a pond, or someone forgetting to pull their trash bins back on time. This is about abuse, harassment, fraud. And if she thinks for 1 second that walking up here with a lawyer will stop what's coming next, she's dumber than I thought. Her lips parted, but I cut her off before she could speak. You built your power on fear, Martha. You bullied this neighborhood into silence. You made people afraid of letters, of fines, of being different. But those days are over. The wind picked up just then, lifting dust in the street and swirling it around our feet. Her lawyer looked uncomfortable now, sensing what was coming but unable to stop it. Your board's under review, I said flatly. Your records are being audited, and I've already spoken with state investigators. This isn't just going away. You're not just the face of the HOA anymore. You're the case. For the first time, I saw it. Fear, real fear, not rage disguised as power, not indignation masquerading as leadership. Fear. Her lawyer muttered something about setting up a meeting. I didn't respond, just turned and walked back up the driveway. She had returned thinking she still had cards left to play. But the deck was mine now. 2 weeks later, the hearing was held in a crisp, echoing municipal hall, the kind with too many chairs and too little warmth. Martha sat at the long table, flanked by her attorney, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her blazer was stiff, her hair was perfect, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Across from her sat the prosecutor, 2 state auditors, and me. I didn't come to gloat. I came to finish what she started. The evidence was damning. The HOA's books were a maze of neighborhood improvement, expenditures that traced back to Martha's preferred vendors that, as the record showed, were owned by shell companies she quietly controlled. Water theft, illegal fines, backdoor deals, even forged approvals for landscaping contracts. But the final nail was the footage. Clear as day, Martha, trespassing on my property, hauling buckets from my private well to her backyard. 2 months' worth of time-stamped footage. And the cherry on top, her HOA emails recovered from a board whistleblower, where she bragged about teaching the sheriff a lesson. When the prosecutor arrested the case, the silence in the room was louder than any gavel. Martha didn't speak, didn't look up. Her power, the illusion of it, was shattered, lying in pieces around her sensible shoes. The board was dissolved within 48 hours. Fines issued under Martha's oversight were rescinded. Residents who had been intimidated and extorted were offered restitution. And Martha? She was fined, stripped of her position, ordered to pay full damages for her actions. She avoided jail time, barely, but the community made sure her name would never hold weight in Cedar Ridge again. Her influence was gone. Her mask ripped away for all to see. A month later, she moved out quietly. No goodbye, no farewell to her, just a rental truck and a defeated woman disappearing down the street she once ruled. The neighborhood changed after that. Slowly, then all at once. People started planting gardens again. Real ones, not the copy-paste kind Martha had enforced. Kids played chalk games on the sidewalks without getting reported. Flags flew. Laughter returned. And me? I sat on my porch every evening, cold drink in hand, watching the sun set over my yard, wildflowers swaying, wind chimes singing softly in the breeze. Peace had finally come to Cedar Ridge, but it didn't come from a policy change or a new set of rules. It came because someone decided to say no. No more fear. No more silence. No more queens with clipboards and grudges. Martha thought she was untouchable, but she forgot one thing. You don't bring a rifle to the sheriff's doorstep and expect to walk away clean. Not here. Not in my town. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever dealt with a Martha in your neighborhood. Justice doesn't always come fast, but when it does, it's worth every step.